Hello and welcome to the Alnwick Castle Podcast. I'm your host Daniel Watkins, and on today's episode we're joined by a guest that visitors to the castle might know as Alchemy Jack when he performs alongside the Company of Artisans. We talk to Jack about everything from alchemy to astronomy to Minecraft as he shares some of his favourite stories and experiences. Please note that there was some alchemical equipment with us when we recorded, so you might hear some background noises and variations in sound level. Please enjoy. I am happy to be joined once again by Karen from the Company of Artisans with a very special guest today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. It's lovely to be back. This morning, we've got our castle alchemist. We've got Dr. John Dee, or Dr. Jack Green. And he's back up at the castle, and he'll be back again in October. We've dragged him up to ask him a few questions, things that possibly he doesn't get a chance to talk about normally, and perhaps things that he's never really spoken about before. So good morning, Jack.
Good day.
Good day. So I wondered if I could ask you, what was it that made you decide that you wanted to be an alchemist?
Well, alchemy's got everything. It's science. It's the beginning of chemistry, the history of chemistry, but it's also got a sort of Harry Potter and Hogwarts dimension.
Right.
And it's full of myth and magic and real science, and that's what gets me, really.
So would you say you're more of a practical alchemist?
Yes, there's a lot of mystery to it, and of course a lot of history. It goes back a very long way, and also it's associated with swindlers and charlatans who got money from people. Also, there's a tradition of it in the Percy family. There was the Wizard Earl, which is well known. So I feel that at Alnwick I'm carrying on a tradition,
Right. So you're here to sort of bring it to life a little.
Yes, and it's very easy to capture children's imagination with it. My leading line when I've got children in front of me, all I have to say is, "Do you like experiments?" And they all say, "Yes, we like experiments." And then I've got them, you see, and then we start doing scientific things, real things, and also fantastical things. So, as I say, alchemy's got everything. It's irresistible.
I remember, because I've known you for just over 30 years now, and I do remember when you first started as an alchemist. I remember the year that you began working as an alchemist and doing alchemical experiments, and I've seen you develop your interest since then. But at the start of what I can remember, you were very much into furnaces and fire and building sort of small kilns, weren't you, as part of your background?
Yes, well, that comes from when I was a potter. And there's two kinds of potters. There's mud potters, that's potters who like making pots with clay, and there's fire potters who like firing them, and I'm definitely a fire potter. So kilns, furnaces, ovens, that's my line. So of course there's lots of that in alchemy.
So some of your experiments are on the sort of the fiery side.
Very much so. Oh yes, fire. You see, we alchemists, we work with the four elements. As I teach children this, you see, well, most of them know it already: earth, air, fire, and water. And of course, lots of fire.
Lots of fire. Okay. Have you ever found that's gotten you into any sort of difficult situations in the past with your experiments in fire?
Just get burnt occasionally. I don't have much hair on the back of my right hand. But of course, there's my story that I almost made gold. You see, the question is, have you made gold? Well, alchemists don't go around bragging that they make gold because they're liable to be arrested by the king's officers and taken off and flung in a dungeon to make gold for the king. So we don't brag about it, but I nearly made gold, but then there was a terrible explosion and my laboratory burnt down, and I was lucky to get away with my life and so on and so on. You know, it's all part of the story.
It's all part of the tale that you tell. So a lot of this is based in fact then. This isn't just you spinning a yarn. This
No.
actually happened to real alchemists in the past.
Oh, yes. Well, I tell the story of Hennig Brand. He wanted to make the Philosopher's Stone. We all value the Philosopher's Stone. Well, immediately that connects with Harry Potter and children and so on. Anyway, the question was, what do you start with? What's the primer materia? And we discussed that quite a lot with the children. What would you start with if you wanted to make the Philosopher's Stone? And once one little girl chirped up and said toothpaste. And I thought, that's once she's got an original mind, she'll go far. Anyway, Hennig Brand, he decided to start with urine. So he got buckets full of urine, 50 buckets of urine, 50 buckets of wee, and boiled it down into a sludge. Well, I've got a little flask with this sludge, the resulting sludge from 50 buckets of wee, which I invite the children to smell, but usually they decline. And he put that into a furnace. To cut a long story short, he had a dramatic outcome, and he had discovered phosphorus. And that's chemistry. That's real chemistry, you see, and that's a real story, which children love, of course.
Yeah. So you're bringing real science to life.
Oh yes, now I've got an experiment where I demonstrate that fire consumes air.
Yeah.
In a flask, a sealed flask,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. So it's a mixture of fantasy and magic and real chemistry, real science.
So part of your beautiful setup that that people can come and see is all of your wonderful artifacts, and as part of your work as an alchemist and as part of your work as a performer, you can't just go to a shop, can you, and say, I want an alchemical flask and it needs to be this big and it needs to do this experiment. So what have you had to do in order to create all of the artifacts that you can see here? What have you actually done for part of that?
Well, it's useful to have been a potter. You see, looking at it from a potter's point of view, a lot of the equipment used by alchemists, flasks and retorts and things like that, which incidentally are much the same as what's used by modern chemists, they're very beautiful. The forms and the shapes of them, which I liked very much. So I get a lot of pleasure out of making alchemical equipment and apparatus, which I can use. There were, I could go on for ages about this and bore you to death. There's 3 grades of apparatus. There's glass flasks and things. The advantage of glass is that you can see what's going on inside, but it's very fragile and you can't make it red hot. So the next grade up for really to resist flame is copper. So you have copper flasks and containers and steel heads and so on. And then the next grade up is fire clay. You have these things made of fire clay, in which case you can make them red hot to assist the reactions and so on. And so I can make the fire clay ones. I make them.
But you've made the glass retorts as well, haven't you? In the
I
past?
have done, yes. But they tend to come to a bad end, glass. So I don't display a lot of glass and use it in my demonstrations because in the end I find it doesn't last very long.
It doesn't last as long. But when I first knew you as an alchemist, you were actually using leather, weren't you, as a series of pipes? You had a series of leather pipes.
Yes, you can use for low temperature to conduct a draft. If you need bellows to conduct air into a furnace, and so you don't get too close to the furnace, so you need a pipe. What do you make a pipe out of? You can make it out of leather.
So failing the leather ones, which didn't last very long. Didn't you have a friend who had a need for glass pipes as well as you? You both had a need, didn't you, for glass pipes? You for carrying out experiments, and him for making barometers.
Barometers, yeah.
So what did you do for him? How did you help that?
Well, we built a glass furnace and made glass pipe. We did glass blowing and things like that. But that's fire again, you see. Well, I know about furnaces, so we built a furnace for him, yes.
How did you actually make those glass pipes?
Well, you put a rod into the pot of red hot molten glass and fill out a great big blob and then blow a bubble in it, and then you simply pull it and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it until you have a long tube.
Yeah.
And these are all techniques that have gone back hundreds of years. This is what alchemists in the past would have done to make their equipment.
Because the great birth of alchemy was in the 5th century. That's the Arabs. The Arabs were the first people to develop alchemy. And that's why you have the prefix AL in front of so many things. For instance, alkaline. Alkaline is alkaline, and al means the. And so you have algebra. Algebra was devised by the Arabs as well. And alchemy, of course, alchemy. And so it goes back to the 5th century, this sort of thing. Alchemy, people ask me, what is alchemy? And they say, oh, you make lotions and potions. And I say, no, that's the province of the apothecary. I'm more likely to make poisons. For alchemy is the science of transformation, of transforming one thing into another. That's alchemy.
What do you love about alchemy? Is it that transformation that's captured your imagination?
It's the myth and the magic and mystery. You see, the medieval alchemists, because alchemy was so ancient, they believed that the ancients had the secret of these things. And there were lots of documents written in Arabic and translated into Greek and Latin, and they're all very mysterious. You see, the difference between an alchemist and a modern chemist is that a modern scientist has to publish his results. He's not taken seriously unless his peers have reviewed his results and he publishes results. Alchemists were exactly the opposite. They kept everything to themselves. They were very secretive. And so if they wrote anything down, they wrote it down in symbolic terms, symbolic language, so that only another alchemist would understand it, that common people wouldn't understand it. Because they believed that the things that they discovered were possibly very dangerous. Indeed, they were. They were responsible for gunpowder, for instance. Explosives were gunpowder created by alchemists. That was originally in China. And so you read a document and it talks about a lion consuming something. And you think, what's that about? Well, that is symbolic of an acid, you see, and they wouldn't speak of an acid, they would refer to it as a lion. Gold was associated with the sun, and all the metals were associated with the different planets. So if you see the moon in an alchemical diagram, that's silver, that means silver. And so it was the decoding of all these mysterious documents that occupied alchemists, medieval alchemists, a great deal. And that's one of the fascinations of alchemy. All these fantastical diagrams and illustrations that seem complete nonsense. But if you knew how to decode them, then you could make gold, you see, if only you knew.
So in presenting this to the public, you obviously have to use some sleight of hand to conceal the truth of what you're doing, because you don't want all those secrets out there, do you?
Well, yes, that's so. I always say to my apprentices, whatever you learn here, you You keep quiet. I always have an assistant here. Very kindly have an assistant, and I only tell them as much as they need to know.
So they won't leave here being a fully qualified alchemist?
Good
then,
heavens, no. Don't want my secrets being spread about, do I?
How do you qualify as an alchemist? People like the Wizard Earl must have had some level of scientific knowledge to avoid blowing themselves up.
Some people think that alchemy would be considered unchristian, but that's not so. To be an alchemist, you had to have two things. You had to have money to invest in all the materials and the apparatus. Some of the materials were quite exotic and far-fetched and dearly bought. And you had to be literate. You had to be able to read Latin and Greek. And so a lot of churchmen, clerics, had these two things. And a lot of Christian churchmen were alchemists. And it was not frowned on. Well, maybe it was in some cases, but it wasn't regarded as unchristian, even though it had Arab roots.
So is there anything as an alchemist that you haven't managed to do that you would love to do? What is the one thing that still eludes you?
Well, I don't know, have a great big furnace, I suppose. I would like to replicate Hennig Brand's experiment where he isolated phosphorus. In fact, I've been involved in a documentary film, the replication of it. That was fun. We never actually made phosphorus, but yes, it would be nice to do that.
One of the things I've learned from being your friend for so long is that you do like a new challenge.
I do.
You do find that doing the same thing every year gets a little dull, and you like a new challenge. And I do remember one of the challenges that you've had was involving a flying machine that you
we
constructed.
made a flying machine, yes.
Well, that's also a medieval. It was a medieval construction, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that's more research. You see, that's Leonardo da Vinci, an absolute genius. Leonardo da Vinci, ahead of his time, and he thought of all sorts of inventions and diagrams of things. For instance, a tank, the military tank. He invented the military tank and the various flying machines, and he wrote about them and drew the diagrams, but never actually made them. You see, he never actually made them. But we've got the documents and the detailed diagrams, so a group of us decided to make one of his flying machines, which occasionally comes out for show.
With all these different interests, would you describe yourself as a polymath?
I think a serial polymath, that is, I get interested in something and do it for a few years and then get interested in something else and do that.
As an alchemist, have you ever had any fortunate accidents with experiments? In the castle, we know the story of Johann Friedrich Böttcher, an alchemist who worked for Augustus the Strong, the Elector of Saxony, in the 18th century. Böttcher couldn't turn metal into gold, but while he was experimenting, he discovered kaolin, the key ingredient for hard-paste porcelain, and this began the Meissen factory, and we have a huge collection of Meissen porcelain in the castle 300 years after Böttcher's day.
Actually, it's not surprising because Paracelsus, another very famous alchemist, said that all sorts of things at alchemy. He said that brewers were alchemists because they transform one thing into another. He said bakers are alchemists. And you could certainly say that potters are alchemists because they turn mud into beautiful objects.
Could you tell us about your work with leeches?
Oh, leeches, well, they're essential. Medical leeches. Now, in Tudor times, in medieval times, bleeding by leeches was considered to be very beneficial. That bleeding in general, it was a feature of Tudor medicine. If anybody was ill, you'd stick leeches all over them and bleed them. So I used to always keep leeches in the fridge. You see, that again, they have their modern uses. If for some reason, some of this apparatus you have here were to fall and cut off your ear, you could take your ear quickly to a hospital and they could easily reattach your ear. This is actual modern medicine. But it wouldn't thrive because the vascular system is not connected, and it would simply fill up with stale blood. However, the hospital goes to the fridge, gets out their leeches and puts them on your ear, and the leech will draw the blood through your ear, replace it with the stale blood with new blood. Do that for 24 hours and your ear will remake its vascular system and be saved. And so leeches are used in modern surgery. And there's a place in South Wales that breeds them for hospitals. But, well, they're quite pretty, actually.
It's like with some of the alchemical techniques, things that people associate with the medieval period and the past. There are versions of some of the things you do that are still in use today.
The technique of distillation with a still, that goes back thousands of years. It's one of the basic processes of alchemy and of chemistry, and incidentally of making whiskey. A very ancient technique.
The two of you have probably done hundreds of demonstrations and performances together. Where are some of the most memorable places you've demonstrated your crafts?
Well, we used to go and visit Bede's World in Jarrow, which is in Newcastle. We would that's a mainly Saxon little village, isn't it? And that was where we developed painter's alchemy, because my difficulty in working with Jack is that I have to keep him interested and I have to keep everything new and give him a new purpose and a new pursuit. So it did once take me the entire journey back down to Newark, where we're based, from Bede's World, to dream up this idea of, as I'm an artist and my background is an artist, and Jack's is alchemy, how could we combine art and alchemy? And so that was where we came up with the idea of the scriptorium, which we do run here at the castle occasionally, which was that Jack would, you started with your beautiful rocks, didn't you? Your lovely, beautiful coloured minerals. And you collect those from all over the place, don't you, to have as specimens. So you have some of those as part of your alchemy display here at the castle.
And a lot of them are used by painters to make their pigments. Where was it? At Kentwell, I was a limner's calciner. That's right. A limner is a painter, and calciner is somebody who uses fire to create things. And I would make the pigments that the limners used. That, of course, is, like alchemy. For instance, there's a colour called burnt umber. You can have raw umber and burnt umber. And the limner's calciner will burn the raw umber and make burnt umber. That's one of the simple things.
And that's something that was carried out in the medieval period as painters.
Of course.
So painters of illuminated manuscripts, which you've got here in the castle library, but also paintings for walls, so decorative walls in castles and in churches. You would paint the walls with different colours, and you'd need somebody with the knowledge of how to create those paints from the raw ingredients, from the raw rocks, which obviously Jack has. In fact, one of them you've used recently, haven't you? The malachite.
That's a green mineral that you grind up. But the most interesting one is, say, vermilion, which is mercury sulfide.
So how do you obtain vermilion from mercury?
Well, you have a closed crucible with a sealed lid, and you put mercury and sulphur in it, and then put it in a furnace and make it hot, and you end up with this bright red pigment, which is mercury sulfide. Very poisonous, very exciting.
A lot of these things do come back to fire, don't they?
Oh yes, of course. Fire, earth, air, fire and water.
But I think there's an obvious preference that's coming through. Yeah, earth, air and water aren't really quite so interesting to you, are they?
Yeah, no, we need fire, yes. Then we can really do things.
So in your pottery kilns at home that you've got, your pottery kiln, what's the sort of hottest that you fire to? What's the temperature that you fire to the most?
Well, in centigrade terms, 1300. at 1300 degrees, which is white hot. It's possible and it's simply with wood. That's a wood-fired kiln.
And what's the purpose of firing that hot? Why would you want to fire that
Well,
hot?
you can make stoneware like that. For 1200, you can melt glass and manipulate glass and do whatever you like with glass. And at 1000 degrees, you can make earthenware.
He's a tinkerer as well as an alchemist.
After our first conversation with Alchemy Jack, it turned out he had more to tell us, so we reconvened the following day for more insights into the world of an alchemist. We are back for part 2 of our conversation with Alchemy Jack. Karen is here with me again, and I think where we left off yesterday, we should start by talking about the developments of alchemy and science in the Islamic world.
Oh, yes. What's called the Golden Age of Islam, whereas the Islamic culture made huge advances in science and astronomy and mathematics and chemistry, and that's where alchemy began.
How long ago was that then?
I think it began AD 500. It was a long time ago.
And this was written down? This was all written?
Yes,
Yeah?
this is all recorded.
How was it that all of those different sciences came to this country? And how long did that take?
Oh, well, that's the Renaissance, the story of the Renaissance. Too long to go into now, but it took all that time. For instance, Copernicus, the 16th century, early 16th century, realised that the Earth turned and the Earth went round the sun instead of the sun going round the Earth, and so on. He's Johnny come lately, because all this sort of thing was thought of as early as AD 500. For instance, people think that we think that in those times everybody thought the Earth was flat, but they perfectly understood that the Earth was a globe. And in fact, one of the characters at that time, actually by astronomical observations, he calculated the circumference of the Earth. Not only did he know it was a globe, he calculated the size of the Earth. Within a few hundred, he was accurate within a few hundred miles. It was an amazing time. Mathematics, algebra was all gone into then, all understood then.
So I've brought up one of your amazingly beautiful bronze or brass disc with the dial on the back and on the front. So what is this called? This
is an astrolabe. This was first devised at that time. It's an astronomical instrument. By observing the stars in particular, but the sun also, you can calculate the date, the time, where you are, and when the sun will rise and when the sun will set on that particular day. Around 1400, Chaucer wrote a booklet about the astrolabe. He was interested in the astrolabe, but it dates from much earlier than his time. He picked it up quite late.
What we're looking at is a circular instrument that looks generally like a clock with two hands in the centre, but there are all sorts of smaller circles and shapes within it. Can you describe a little bit about how it looks?
In the face of it is this elaborate and beautiful, it's like an artwork of tracery of cut brass. I'm taking it out now.
It looks like a very decorative, sort of like a cut work, like a piece of fretwork, with all sorts of curves and circles and little tiny points that sort of flare off. So it's an incredibly decorative thing, and it's got writing on it.
Beautiful.
With, I can see Beetlejuice written on it.
That's the name of a star.
Okay, I can see Canis Major.
So the dog star.
And then in the smaller circle in the middle, I can see the Latin names for all of the star signs. So I can see this. So it's not just astronomy, it's astrology, isn't it? This?
Yes, astrology. Well, astronomy and astrology, they were intertwined then, but it's got all the signs of the zodiac on it. What it actually is, this rite is a map of the heavens, and each little pointer is a star, and the names of the stars are here. It's an accurate map of the heavens, and it rotates in the instrument because actually the stars, the whole system of the stars rotates once a year, because the Earth is turning round in the cosmos. Not only is it a wonderful scientific instrument, it's also very beautiful.
You said that it will tell you where you are as well. So it's not just where the stars are. How does this tell you where you are?
It has an alidade on the back where you by turning it and sighting through these two sights here, you can measure the angular height of any object.
Oh, okay.
With this instrument, you can actually tell the height of a building simply by measuring the angular height of the top of it and then measuring the distance between yourself, the observer, and the bottom. But for instance, if you measure the angular height, with this instrument, measure the angular height of the North Star, you can tell what latitude you are, what latitude you're in.
So you can tell where you are by where the stars are?
Where the North Star is, yes. And all the star system rotates around the North Star. The North Star is in the northern hemisphere. The North Star is the one star that doesn't move. All the other stars move across the sky. I often say to children, I say, see, this is a basic thing that children are interested in, space travel and all that kind of thing, but they don't know the basic facts, which I say to them, does the sun rise and set? They say, oh, it's the Earth turning. But I say, yes, the sun rises in the east, it travels across the southern sky and sets in the west, doesn't it? And they know that. And then I say, does the moon rise and set? And they're stumped. But then I explain that the moon does rise and set, and sometimes you see it high in the sky, and then we know why the moon rises and sets, because the Earth's turning. And then I say, do the stars rise and set? And they all say no. The stars rise and set in the same way. And this instrument relies on the fact that the stars are in a different position in the sky depending on the time of night and also the date, the season.
Let's go back to the circumference of the Earth. How did Al-Biruni measure it?
Very nerdy. It's ingenious. There was, this is in Persia somewhere, I think, somewhere quite close to the equator anyway. There was a very deep well. I mean, there were obviously lots of deep wells all over human habitation, but the characteristic of a deep well is it must be absolutely vertical, because otherwise your bucket would scrape against the sides, you see. So your bucket has to go all the way down and come all the way up again without touching the sides. Therefore, the bore of a well, particularly a deep well, is absolutely perpendicular. Now, it was known that this well, on 2 dates of the year, the sun shone all the way down to the bottom. That you could observe that the sun was shining all the way to the very bottom. Al-Biruni knew those dates, and everybody knew those dates. It was just common knowledge. And that meant that, of course, the sun was absolutely perpendicular to the surface of the Earth. So he journeyed quite a long distance, and on that date, when he knew the sun would be shining to the bottom of this well, from where he was, he observed the angular height of the sun, which was not vertical, because he was in a different place on the Earth's surface, you see. And he measured that angle, which we shall say it was 7 degrees he measured. And then he multiplied the distance he was away from the well, say 1,000 leagues. He multiplied that by divided 7 into 360, which is a complete turn. What's 7 into 360? I don't know. Anyway, he multiplied that figure by the distance he'd travelled, and he said, well, that must be the distance all the way around the Earth. And he was accurate within a few 100 miles, I think. I mean, that's staggering. Alchemy is very much about earthbound things, but it's all of a piece. It's the scientific mind, you see. Mathematics, you know. I mean, of course, mathematics is useful in commerce, but theoretical mathematics is wonderful. You know, it's just a brilliant science. In fact, mathematicians say that mathematics is the root of all science, depends on mathematics. But there, physicists say that physics is the root of all science. So there. Anyway, it was all going on in the golden age of Islam.
The Wizard Earl of Northumberland, like you, was interested in astronomy, but he was also an alchemist, and he performed experiments.
And he was doing that here at Alnwick?
Well, he had a number of houses, but we know he was experimenting in his cell in the Tower of London.
Oh, really? So he wasn't thrown into the tower for his practice of alchemy then? He wasn't?
He was thrown in the tower because we were talking about fire a lot yesterday. His cousin Thomas planned to use quite a lot of fire to blow up the Houses of Parliament.
Oh, it was that.
1605.
That was his cousin.
That was his cousin and his constable at Alnwick Castle. So gunpowder and fire came into it again, but not from an alchemical point of view.
What's the biggest thing you've ever created as part of your work?
You mean the biggest explosion?
Or the biggest experiment that you've ever created? Because I know that some of the experiments you've done are to do with vacuums. They're all sorts of different science, aren't they? They're not just to do with blowing things up. What's the biggest vacuum you've ever created?
Oh, well, there was the Magdeburg experiment. That was
involving
to prove that the atmosphere is under pressure, that we are under pressure. Atmospheric pressure. We're not aware of atmospheric pressure, but in Magdeburg, von Guericke devised an experiment to prove that the atmosphere was under pressure. There's an illustration of it in all children's science books. He got a big sphere, big copper sphere, and it was halved and could be put together with a seal all the way around so that you could extract all the air in it and create a vacuum in it. And then, of course, it would be sort of sucked together. There was nothing keeping the halves together except the atmospheric pressure. And then he set 24 horses, cart horses, on each side of it to try to pull it apart, and they couldn't pull it apart. And he said that proved that there's massive atmospheric pressure which is pushing the two halves together. And until you allowed the air back inside the sphere, you couldn't get them apart.
So how did you recreate that?
Oh, we did it in Devon. We actually did it, yes.
With 24 horses?
Yes, we did have 24. It might not have been 24, but it was an awful lot of horses. And we recreated it. The Magdeburg Museum sent the sphere over, and we took the characters of von Guericke and his helpers. And it was a splendid demonstration. But yes, that was probably the most elaborate thing we ever did.
So atmosphere and experiments are some of the things that you recreate here, aren't they? You work with air and atmosphere. It's not just
there's air. Well, I mean, we alchemists, we treat of the four elements. The first thing the children have to know is the four elements: earth, air, fire and water. And it's surprising how many children know that.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's in Harry Potter, is it?
I think there's something called Minecraft that the children are still very keen on.
Does that involve earth, air, fire and water?
It involves all sorts of elements. I had to look after your display yesterday for momentarily while you were creating a wonderful atmosphere outside.
Something else, yes.
And so I have small children who can identify all of your marvellous artefacts.
Well, some of them, yes.
And minerals far better than I can.
They were asking Minecraft, yes.
Yes, they were asking me what these various elements were that were laid out on the table, and I couldn't tell them because I was only the assistant, but they were able to tell me, so it's wonderful they can demonstrate their knowledge.
If anyone was inspired to become an alchemist after seeing you and watching these experiments, what kind of mind do you need to be an alchemist?
You need an interest in chemistry, but you also need a fanciful, fantastical mind as well. You have to be interested in myth and magic, but it's mucking about with things, you see. I mean, all kids love mucking about with things, don't they? It's just fun.
Curiosity, perhaps it's basic curiosity.
Yes, but it has to include myth and magic as well as solid chemistry. And to me, that's the fascination of it. The mystery, myth and magic, and also swindling. There's about the same time as Shakespeare. It's Ben Jonson, I think, wrote a play called The Alchemist, which was about a gang of charlatans and swindlers who set themselves up as alchemists in order to fleece rich people of their money. And that was a side of alchemy where people would say, oh, what we need, you give us some gold, we can multiply it 20-fold. Of course, when they got the investment, they disappeared. So alchemy at that time got a bad name.
Luckily, you are here to restore alchemy's good reputation. Thank you very much for telling us some of your alchemy secrets today on the Alnwick Castle Podcast.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Alchemy Jack and the Company of Artisans will be returning to Alnwick Castle at the end of October this year if you'd like to see some of Jack's experiments in person. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please let us know by leaving a review or 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts, or by recommending the podcast to your friends. You can tweet us at Alnwick Castle or email us on podcast@alnwickcastle.com. Join us again in 2 weeks when we'll be exploring Alnwick Castle's role in the gunpowder plot of 1605 in much more detail. Until then, I've been Daniel, thank you for listening, and goodbye.